Hello there YouTubers. In today's video I will talk about this group Blondie and their records that they came out with. Some I have on vinyl as this one, and some I have on CD, and some others I have listened to at Spotify. But we begin with the first one. The group was formed in 1974, and eventually this first record came in 1976 on a label called Private Stock Recordings. However, the quality was not very great on these pressings, so there were rumors that some tracks jumped and sticked and that, and also off-center pressings very often with these. You can read a little bit about it on Discogs, by the way. Here we see on the back side, this is not the first pressing. This is a reissue on Chrysalis Records, where they made the contract after the disappointing sales from Private Stock Recordings. This is a German pressing, high quality pressing. Anyway, here are the members of the group. The most famous of them is Deborah Harry. She has also made some own records after the band disbanded in 1980s. Now, here are the tracks on the first album. This one is, like I said, 1977. There were 3 singles that was released from the album. And these were Ex-Offender, In the Flesh, and Rip Her to Shreds. It's good songs. On this album, the group is making quite a lot of rock, punk rock kind of, and yeah, a little bit of that, kind of like the Clash first album in places. Then next year, 1977, they did a follow-up called Plastic Letters. The most famous song from this album is called Dennis. Here we see what they did, by the way. Yes, and here are the tracks on the album. I will talk about the songs after this, and a little bit of that. Now, it's still a bit punk rock in places, but this has more new wave than punk rock, I would say. It's a bit pop and a bit other kind of music there. Now, this is a Canadian pressing, by the way. There were 3 titles from this album that was released as singles, and these were Kidnapper. However, that was only released in Japan. And the most famous song on this album is called Dennis. And that was actually a cover from a group named Randy and the Rainbows that made the song in 1963. So, Blondie's version reached number 2 in UK, United Kingdom, on the hit list. And the other song that was released in Europe was I'm Always Touched by Your Presence Dear. Tracy Ullman has made a cover of that one, by the way. There's also a private stock recording pressing of this album as well. So it's not only a chrysalis, but when this came out, they had almost stopped with private stock. So if you have a private stock recording of this one, that is pretty rare, I would say. This is a chrysalis recording. Then in 1978, the disco had begun taking over the world a little bit, and you can see that on this album as well, on Hear It, because there's some disco songs on this album. The most famous of them is Heart of Glass, but let's see on the titles here. And I would say it's a little bit synth pop also on this album. I'm not really sure if you would call it disco or synth really. Anyway, this is a UK pressing, by the way. There were 6 songs from this album that was released as singles. And these were Picture This, I'm Gonna Love You Too, Hanging on the Telephone, Heart of Glass, Sunday Girl, and lastly, One Way or Another. And like I said, Heart of Glass was the one that was most famous. And also an interesting thing about that song is that there were 2 versions depending on the pressing, because on this album I have, which is early pressing, the Heart of Glass is about 3.5 minutes. On later pressings that came in 1979, I think, that song was about 5 minutes instead. So there's that difference with that. And you can see on the label here, Heart of Glass short version is only called that. The long version is called disco version. So if you see that on label disco version, you know it's the long version of that song. And here we have the next album that came in 1979 and is called Eat to the Beat. And here we have one of the singers from that album that is called Atomic. And also that song was the most famous from that, I would say, that reached the most, that was on the list, the highest place on the list. I think it's called that. Sadly, the B-side is one of the songs on the album. It would be interesting if it would be another song. However, this is UK pressing. On the US pressing, there were a live song on the B-side. So this is a UK. This is a Swedish pressing of that album. And here we have the titles. Now this album has an interesting thing, and it's that this was the first album ever I heard with Blondie, because there was a friend of mine that recorded this album to me on a tape and gave it to me, and I liked the tape so much, so I wore it out and he made a new copy. And after a while I had forgot about it. Then I found this album used in a second-hand store, and I didn't know it was that album, but I recognized it instantly when I heard the first song. Oh yeah, this is the album I had on tape so many times. So that was quite interesting. About the music on the album, it's more new wave and synth pop than punk, but there was some reggae as well, and a bit of funk, and also a lullaby. So it's an interesting mix from this album. There were 4 songs that was released as singles, and these were Dreaming, Union City Blue, The Hardest Part, and, like I said, Atomic. Of all albums with the vinyls, I like this the most. I do like Parallel Lines, Plastic Letters also. No, Parallel Lines, sorry. But this is my favorite album by Blondie ever. On vinyl, that is. It's a bit strange later because they were also released on CD that I have. Now, the next album is named Outer America. This is a Swedish pressing I have on this also both used. All of these albums are both used. There was a song that came between this E to the Beat and this album that is called Call Me, and that was in a movie called American Gigolo. I have the single, but not a separate single. I have it on a Complication album. Anyway, the most famous track from this album is called The Tide is High. There's also a song that is named Rapture, but that wasn't as popular as The Tide is High. Now, The Tide is High is actually that is a cover also by a group named The Paragons that came in 1967. Now, here are the songs on the album. The first song, Europa, is an instrumental song, so they never sing in that one. Yeah, but I like the album. But my favorite is, of course, The Tide is High. That's the one I think about more when I think about this album most. So then in 1982, next album came out, and that is called The Hunter. Now, this, you may wonder why I have cut out a little bit here. Well, it's because this is a used album as the previous also, but there were a little bit of mold down here on the later part of the cover, so I cut that out and changed the inner package also because there were a bit molded there too. And I washed the vinyl very carefully to remove any mold and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit warped also, but not so much. You can still play it good. The thing is, I think it has lay like that. That is not a good thing when it came to vinyls. They should stand like this, but right now I have them like that because I review them a short time, so doesn't matter really that short time. Now, this was not a good success, this album. There were only 2 singles from this that was released, and these were Island of Lost Souls and War Child. There's a bit of interesting story here about the song that is called For Your Eyes Only. You might recognize that from a movie by James Bond, and yes, that was supposed to be for the James Bond movie. They were asked to make that song, but they didn't want to. Instead, it was Sheena Easton who made the song. But it's still interesting hearing their version of the song. It's a bit different than Sheena Easton's song, I would say. After this album they disbanded, and went separate ways. Deborah Harry made some own records. I will not talk about them in this video, but well, they did. She did. Some of them good, some may not so great. And the next album is on CD, and it's called No Exit, as you can see. It was made in 1999. It came out in 1999. And this is a big hit on that is called Maria. There were other 2 songs from it released as singles, Nothing Is Real But a Girl and No Exit. But it was the Maria song that really made it to the charts, hit charts, so to speak. It's a bit hard to read the titles on it, sadly, because it's they have written it in a bad way, so it doesn't make a good, but I think you can read the titles. This is Review, by the way, made in 2001, 2 years after the first version. And this one I did bought in a store when when this review came. I didn't bought the first version. I don't know why I didn't, but yeah, I didn't anyway. So it has 2 bonus tracks. Now the next albums I don't have on physical copy, but I have listened to them on Spotify, and I have Wikipedia page open here so you can see the covers of them anyway. So next album came in 2003 and was named The Curse of Blondie. I would say it's okay album, but I don't think it's that good if you thinking about this album and then that album. I mean, it's yeah, but as you can see, there's here there's a bit of different kind of music on it. I mean, rock, and it's dance pop, it's Japanese traditional music, it's reggae, it's jazz, and yeah. So it's fine album, but not my cup of tea really. But the next album, that is called Panic of Girls, that one I do like better. It's it's interesting. They have some covers on it by Michael Jackson, and there's also Beatles cover and a bit of other stuff as well. It's I don't know what I could say, but I do like that album better. So, and there were 2 singles, like you can see there, that was released from that one. It's good. It's a good album, I would say. And of course there were also some bonus discs and some deluxe thing. And the next album that came in 2014 was a double album. Now you see, the first one is a greatest hits album, and the next one is a studio album. Now the greatest hits, it's a bit different because it's they have made some remixes that I don't really like. I think they are better in the original later than. So that is not nice. But I do like the other album that is called Ghosts of Download. Now this music, it says, is only made on the computer. That is kind of interesting. So they don't have real drums. Instead, the drums are made on the computer. That is quite interesting. Well, I was supposed to buy this album on vinyl, but eventually it was a bit too expensive, I thought, so I never did. But like I said, I've listened to it on Spotify, and that is fine. There were 3 singles from this album that was released, and it was released as a vinyl album, CD, and that. And then lastly, in 2017, Pollinator. Well, it's also a good album. I like the singles from it. It's a very rock album, I would say, this one. Now, I'm not sure, but I don't think this was... Yes, it was released as CD also, it seems to be, but I'm not sure if it was released as vinyl, really. I'm not so sure about that. But yeah, I have listened to the Spotify version, and that was a good album. So, but yeah, it isn't. These albums are not so good as Eat to the Beat. However, Ghost of Downloads is really great, and no Exit, but the other that I have listened on Spotify, I don't know. It's something I don't. They are not as good as that favorite album of mine. And anyway, so yeah, everyone has different opinions. And that is my opinion. Now, in next video, I will talk about another group that is called Electric Light Orchestra, or shortly for ELO. Stay tuned for that.